Well, it looks like the Senate has passed the latest $1.9 trillion spending bill, which is supposed to save us all from the clutches of the Wu flu. Now, you wouldn't know it by looking at the stock market, but the U.S. economy is still in terrible, terrible shape. And I don't just mean structurally, like I meant, a year and a half ago when I would talk about how the economy's in bad shape despite what the stock market says. I mean, there are, I think I just read 18 million people currently receiving unemployment benefits. And that is not the number of unemployed people. That is a subset of the number of unemployed people. A lot of people in this country are so unemployed that they're not even looking for work anymore, and their unemployment benefits expired a long time ago, and they're just, sitting at home doing nothing. Other people probably haven't filed or can't get through the system or something, or some other reason. So tens of millions of people in this country are out of work. Around 20 million people lost their jobs last March or April, right in there. And not even half of those people have gotten their jobs back. Well under half, I believe. And so therefore, you would think that this $1.9 trillion, they're spending so much money. Wow, that must be to help all of these poor people who were put out of work by lockdowns and whatnot, correct? I mean, that that would make sense. The government spending money because the government forced these people and said to them, hey, you're not allowed to work anymore. You're not even allowed to go see, your wife give birth in the hospital. And so now Congress is paying these people some restitution, right? Well, not really. From what I was reading, and this is from, mainstream news, Washington Post, about 750 billion is going to go to regular people, well, not just unemployed people, but Americans in general, in the form of $1,400 checks and $300 a week unemployment supplements. I believe it was 400 billion going to those unemployment checks, and the $1,400 checks will, for everybody, will end up being around 350 billion. And so I believe that still leaves about $1.15 trillion going to all sorts of other things, pet projects, essentially. Money to local governments to build new bridges and name them after Democratic politicians, that sort of thing. I saw one line item in there. Well, it wasn't a line item, but one of the categories was some quote-unquote summer enrichment programs for public schools, and that was billions and billions and billions of dollars. I don't know what those kids are doing for summer break, but that seems a bit excessive, don't you think? It's almost like most of these items, all of these earmark, well, I mean, is earmark really the right word? All of these individual programs and these bills that get passed by Congress are just handouts to whoever is able to get something stuffed in the bill to benefit themselves. That's exactly, the way Washington works. And I don't know how there isn't even one senator who, wants to grandstand this and just, and they should do this with all of these stupid so-called stimulus bills and just point out, hey, I can very clearly see here what the money is that's actually going to help the people whose lives have been destroyed by the government, shredding our economy. That is a small portion of the bill. I would like to vote for that, but the rest of this is horrible, and you should all be ashamed of yourselves. And then you should proceed, to vote no on it. I don't know if Rand Paul and Ron Johnson did ultimately vote no on it. I doubt that they did for because politically it seemed, oh my gosh, it's too bad. But I mean, if I were them, I would go on TV and make that case and say, hey, I'd be happy to vote to give people who have been impoverished by the government to have the government pay them restitution, or to try and make them whole. Pay damages is essentially what they'd be doing. For what the government has done to them. But that's not what this bill does. At least, not for the most part. I mean, here we are in 5 minutes. I've made the argument, as with specifics, as to why this is a terrible bill. and yet everybody still votes for it? Now, why would that be? Why is it that there isn't even just one person, or who knows, maybe there's a couple. Why isn't it that there's not, at least a handful of people in the Senate who, has some common sense where this is concerned? And the answer is, of course, that people get brought on board into these bills because leadership lets them put their own pork in there too. That's the way the sausage is made. Everybody, any individual person would look at a bill like this and go, that's disgusting. Look at all this. I'm not voting for all that crap. There's a very small percentage of what's in that bill that I want to vote for. So I'm going to vote no because the majority of it is stuff I don't want. Then leadership can come and say, hey, and they dangle a carrot in front of their eyes. And they say, hey, wouldn't you like a couple $1 billion going to your district? And then you can go home and tell your constituents, hey, look, I brought home the bacon. We got a new library because of me. And name it the Congressman John Smith Library. Now, an interesting little tidbit from yesterday is that I guess it was Bernie Sanders tried to bring up an amendment to put in a $15 minimum wage hike into this bill, which would have essentially been a poison pill. The bill actually wouldn't have passed if they did that, because a $15 minimum wage would be apocalyptic for the job market. I mean, you're in a depression and with double-digit unemployment, and you want to raise the minimum wage and put even more people out of work. And then, of course, the people who are unemployed now, it's going to be even harder for them to try and find a job. Some of them might never be able to find a job. I mean, there's a lot of people who weren't able to find a job after 2008. But I won't get into that. I mean, plenty of people have beat the minimum wage argument thing to death. Either you accept basic logic and reason, or you don't. I'm not going to get into that. But I have to say, I love the way that Dems are just absolutely dogpiling on Sinema for the way that she came in during that vote. It was a yay or nay thing on the amendment to add the $15 minimum wage, and she just kind of walked in and she, twisted her hips a little bit and gave a thumbs down. And I have to say, that was a wonderful performance. I would have clapped for her on the floor of the Senate if I were standing there. And I'm gonna admit, I thought she had a great outfit on too. I'm a sucker for pleated skirts, which just made her owning the libs even more succulent. So, not really an important matter in the grand scheme of things, but I just wanted to mention that because it was funny. I mean, you can find I think somebody clipped it and made it into a GIF. It was floating around Twitter yesterday. But I mean, it's pretty funny. Sinema and Manchin are doing the Lord's work, defending civilization up there. Now, it's also going to be interesting to watch how this bill affects the bond market. I would imagine that because we've known that this was coming for a while, that this is already going to be priced in. But when all of this new cash, the $1,400 checks, start hitting people, are they going to use that to pay off debt? Because I did see a story. I should have read it, but I just glanced past it, and it just came to mind that apparently people are right now actually paying down credit card debt on net, not going deeper into debt. And if people are going to take their stimulus checks and do that, then that's going to completely reverse my my inflation prediction, or I shouldn't say prediction, because I don't know necessarily when we're going to see high enough levels of inflation that which actually show up in the Fed's CPI or PCE numbers, because the way they calculate inflation at the Fed is makes it very difficult to see any inflation in the economy. But of course, paying down debt is is a deflationary action. And so if people took these $1,400 checks and didn't just go buy new TVs at Walmart, which is what I would expect them to do, because most people in America have an absurdly high time preference. They're not the kinds of they're the kinds of people to go into debt, not to pay off debt. That's just not really how Americans roll. But if a substantial amount of people did do that, take this $1,400 and pay down debt, the stimulus bill might on net Now, again, I highly doubt this, but it could, theoretically on net, be deflationary. Or at least that section of it, the 350 billion, I believe it is, that's going to these $1,400 checks. But the $300 a week, I don't see that going to pay down debt. Those are unemployed people. Those are, they're going to need that money to, to keep the lights on and to eat and to, well, I guess in these northern states, keep the heat on. So, I mean, I'll have to keep an eye on it. Things are definitely going to get worse from here. We have not bottomed. The federal government and the Fed have not been able to put a floor in the depression because they did not let it bottom out before they, went all in on their stimulus shenanigans. And so the only variable, or the variable that's going to break out first, where we're first going to see all of this negative economic energy make manifest, is going to have to be in the inflation rate. Because once that starts to creep up, that will eat into the federal government's ability to just limitlessly crank out these stimulus bills, which are, barely keeping the patient alive. If inflation starts to creep up, we'll see interest rates continue to rise, which is already a problem that the federal government should be very concerned about. They should not be wasting, if they care about what they're doing, they should not be wasting, precious debt on these pork project crap when, if the current trajectory upwards in interest rates is maintained, the servicing of the existing $28 trillion in federal debt will start to become more and more expensive, and that will limit the federal government's ability to issue new debt, and therefore that will put a constraint on the federal budget. But that, of course, will come after the Fed loses control of interest rates, which, in my opinion, they have not yet, but they are they appear to be losing control. I think that the Fed still probably has some tricks left up their sleeve, so I won't count them out yet. But I would not at all feel comfortable or confident if I were in Congress's position. But then again, I mean, these people don't even think about these matters. What I'm discussing here is on a level that's way, it's like 10,000 feet above, the way Congress thinks. So with that said, I think I'll leave things off here for today.